Could you create 12 applications or tools in 12 days using nothing but vibe coding and Claude Code as your coding agent? In this quest that we're working on, we've already gone down day 1 and 2. In day 1, what we did was we created the FlyGen harness, and that's this application that you see right here. It has concepts like a configuration system and a little menu over on the left that we're going to use for each of the applications that we built. On day 2, we worked through on the primary brain, and the primary brain is a Claude agent SDK. So if we say something like, "Hello, Appy Dave," it will use my Claude Code account and the Max plan to communicate in a way similar to if I was using Claude Code. Now, the next area for us to look into is memory, and this is hooking up the concept of a second brain. And for today, we'll test it out by using file system-based second brains and Claude skills, Kybernesis, and we'll also have a look at Kybernesis AI and see if we can hook it up to that as a second brain. And what that provides us with is the idea of a neural memory graph and workflow automation if we can get it up and running. Anyway, I'm Appy Dave. Let's get into it. Now, before we get started with looking at the second brain, which is day 3, I thought I'd just take a moment out to talk about certain issues that people can have when they're vibe coding. And what that could be is that you check in something into your repository. This is where we store the code. That could be seen by a malicious actor, and they could use it to maybe steal money from you. They might do it by using API keys that you've checked in by accident and then start using those API keys and you're up for a big bill. Or they might find other ways of checking your code and seeing if there's something that they can manipulate and cause you a bit of pain. Now, most of the code that we're doing in this session is really just free for other people to use as they see fit. It's not a production level system, so I'm not putting in all the checks and balances that you might need in a larger application. But what I did do 5 minutes before this video started was I went and had a look at this idea of Git leaks. And Git leaks is this little tool, a little hook that we can put into the code base so that anytime we upload our code to the cloud so that it's safe and backed up and versioned, we can make sure that we're not checking in some sort of problem along the way. And the way I did that at the beginning of this session was that I just asked it to look at 2 of my other applications. That was FlyHub and FlyDeck, look for a pattern that I might have used in the past and come up with a plan of action. And what it did was it came up with a little requirements document, and I took that requirements document and just gave it to the developer conversation on the right. It took a few minutes for it to write all the code, and I've just handed it back. And so as we get into the next areas of this application where we're starting to work with API keys, we hopefully won't check any of those in to our public-facing repository. So with that little tweak out of the way, we can move on to day 3, which is the second brain. So let's have a talk about what the second brain could be. A few weeks ago, I did a video on the BMAD method, and I was just looking through the comments this morning, and I saw someone talking about what is a brain in the context of agents. And in simple terms, what a brain is just context, information, documents that you have available, which your large language model can pull on. So you might have all your Google Docs for your company, or you might have documentation for the code that you're writing, and you want to make it available as a second brain. And what I do in my own system, I have a folder on my computer which I call brains, and if we do a tree on it, what we'll see is a whole lot of markdown documents in different categories of folders. So for instance, when I'm working with Claude Code, what I'd like to do is have any brain information around the agent SDK. I have stuff around Claude Code. I have stuff around skills. Or when I'm working with the BMAD method, I have information around version 4 and I have information around version 6. Now, these files that you're looking at are not the official documentation. I also have that on my computer as well in folders often called SDK or some other repository on the internet. And what I like to do is cross-reference the information I've got in my own brains, which is just the way I'm formulating information. Maybe I'm taking it from YouTube videos. Maybe I'm taking it from searches on the internet. And then I like to link it through to the SDKs so that I also have access to official documentation. So if I was to start Claude Code just in one of the brains folders, what I could do is say something along the lines of, What can you tell me about Appy Dave's content pillars that he works on, and what are the branding colors that he works with? So what we're doing is we're just firing off a little prompt, and hopefully it's going to search in the correct locations. And it's already in the first two searches started to find files that are in the content pillars folder and in the Appy Dave brand and design system folder. Now, this is not the only way that you can do a second brain. If you were using ChatGPT, you might have access to projects. Gemini and Claude have similar sorts of concepts. Maybe you're hooking into Google Docs. But for me, I'm just reading little markdown documents that are sitting on my computer. And I love it working this way because I can change them anytime I like from Claude Code and read them pretty easily. Now, for this to work, or actually for the content to be discovered, what we've really got to do is go and work with, say, the Claude MD file, or maybe we've got some skills that are aware of where folders are on the computer, and they can gather data. But another way that you can make brain information available is directly from the applications that you vibe coding. So at the moment, we're recording a video, and if I said something along the lines of, Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers, whatever the word is, what's going to happen when I stop the video is that the recording I just recorded has just appeared here on the computer. If I rename it, it's going to go into a new chapter underneath this particular video. And while that's happening, some transcripts are going to run. Now, my transcript system is running directly off my computer and it's fairly slow. So by the time we get to this, it could be about 3 or 4 minutes before we get there. But once it's done, what will happen is within the transcript system, I will have all the text that I just said, including that phrase around Peter Piper. Now, I also know that this particular application we're working on, or the video, has a code. It's called B96. So what we can do is go back to our conversation that we were having. Earlier, we were just talking to the file system. But what if we said something along the lines of, can you go and have a look in a video called B96 in the FlyHub application and just tell me, what was David talking about with Peter Piper? And what we'll do is we'll let that prompt kick in. So what we could do is come over to our little application and we could press this button and we can take the context as it is by pressing the copy button. But the good thing about second brains and using Claude skills is that we could also just talk directly to this document and grab that information. We're going to go back to this prompt that we've already started writing and we'll say, can you identify who it was and what was really trying to be said? And when we press enter, what should happen is that a skill should kick in. It should be the skill for FlyHub. And FlyHub is going to look for a video. And the video we're looking for right now is this one called B96. But the skill's also smart enough just to check whether the actual web server is running. So it's done a health check. And now it's doing a search and we've got a query on the end of it called B96. And it's going to grab the transcript from this. If we press Control-O, we could see all the information coming in from that web application. It's identified the transcript file, it's read in what I actually said, and it's cleaned it up with what it should have said. And so what we're looking at, whether we're getting information out of an application like we did here, or whether we're just getting information directly out of the file system, is that we're interacting with a second brain. It's not the brain that comes with the large language model. It's extra information that we're bringing in for context. And it's one of the simplest ways we can get context in. Now, there are more complex systems like RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, or other sorts of memory systems. Now, somehow, what we want to do is hook the application that we've been building, and that's this application, and probably work with this chat interface. We want to hook it into our file system. Where on the file system? Well, probably this docs folder. Now, if we had access to the documentation folder, what we'd have access to is all the planning I did before we started the application. Plus, we'd have access to all the functional requirements and non-functional requirements that we've been creating. We'd also have concepts like the backlog, which is just representing what we've done or what we've got to do, or we could look at the change log, which gives us a little bit more detail. So these are the sorts of information that we want to make available from the application that we're building over here. So I think to get started, we'll head down to a terminal And rather than starting off with the product owner or the developer, which we've done a lot in this series, we'll just have a basic conversation and see if we can get a multi-agent system working that can go and read some of those structures, figure out a plan of action for us, write up a particular brief, and see if it can all come together all in one hit with asynchronous Claude agents. Now what I'd like to do is use our product owner and turn that into a proper requirements document. The product owner is just finished. We've got the PO session complete. We've got this new document called Functional Requirement 05. It's related to the second brain skill. We're just going to start Claude code in a second window, go straight to the developer. We see this little gray suggestion. So we'll just press tab and we'll execute that. It will now start building things out. Hopefully we get a working system where we can use a skill. And if we're really lucky, we'll be able to use it from within this chatbot just to talk to our documentation. I'm going to take us over to the terminal and I'm going to start off a prompt that says, run this in plan mode. And then what we're going to do is state our goal. So the goal is to integrate the Claude Agent SDK that we've already built with a local second brain. And we'll tell it that what we want to do is use either a skill or a tool to retrieve information. Now I'm just going to select the folder we're in, we'll paste it in, and we'll also put the word docs because that's where everything happened to be. Now we've just put in this area called use multiple sub-agents, and then we'll put in the first one that we'd like to do. So step 1, and this can be synchronous, so we can get the answer back and respond to it. And I just want this particular agent to read our documentation, just make sure it's coherent. Do we have a topology, an index, table of contents? After that, we can also kick off asynchronously another agent. What this should do is spin up 3 agents to run in parallel and asynchronously, and one will do research on how to integrate the skills or the tool into the agent SDK that we've done. We'll ask it to search the Anthropic Claude code documentation. I'm being quite specific here because I'm hoping it'll use the internal tool to do that, but it can also use online examples. We're just looking for integration patterns at this stage, and we've got a little bit of information in the best practices for a skill design that's just reading from the file system. We'll just make sure that before it solidifies the documentation, we have clarifying questions being asked around whether we want to have indexing like the folder structure and file structure, or whether we want to have content coming through. So in step 3, before we solidify the documentation, we just want to ensure that it's asking questions that would make sense for what we're trying to do. And then in step 4, we want it to design the skill. And I'm really looking for it to happen with either a list or file system mode or a content mode. After that, I just want it to write the requirements into the conversation stream, and we'll then use the product owner to turn it into a requirements. So with that in place, let's kick it off and see what happens. At the moment, it's seeing that it wants to do a multi-step plan with sub-agents. So here's our multi-step plan kicking in right here. It's using one of my own agents that do abridgments. So that's essentially taking a whole lot of information and compressing it, but not losing too much detail. And if we just press Control-O, we can see everything that it was reading just then. And this is synchronous, so it's running step 1 before it's doing anything else. It's come up with a step 1 complete doc audit results. It looks like it's going to go straight into step 2 and run 3 parallel agents, but the recommendations are, these are minor cosmetic issues, so nothing we need to do here. Look at that, it's using the Claude code guide. So that was the first one. Made sure that it used its own internal agent to go and read Claude docs. The other 2, it's just doing search on the internet, and they're all running in parallel at the moment. This is pretty cool. I wasn't expecting this. I'm going to just pick one sort of document that it should read. We'll press next. The development is on track. We've got a bunch of items it's going to do, work with a security TypeScript file, a scanner, a reader. I'm a little wary of what it's doing here because we haven't talked about Kybernesis yet, and I think it's just picked up the fact that I've got the name somewhere in the system. So I can see as it's developing this that it's using Kybernesis all the way through. So what it's done is it's confused the next part, and it's mainly because I never had the concept of doing a local second brain. I think before we move on and even test it, I do want to get the name of this correct because Kybernesis will be the next area I'm just going to let it know the problem we've got is that the version we've implemented is the local file reader version. What I'll just do is paste in Kybernesis AI. Can you go and rename it? So we'll let that go through and hopefully it comes up with a better name. Here we are at Kybernesis AI. Now, the way I know about this particular application is that the guy that built it lives a couple hundred meters away from me. And right now he just sent me a message saying that he was rebuilding the database. So we're going to get into it in a moment. But the only time I've ever seen this in action is from his house. And it's an awesome looking application. So I'm hoping it's going to solve the problems that I have with memory management, which we saw a solution to by reading directly from the file system. But what this allows you to do is build your own knowledge base. And when documents hit this system, they get intelligently chunked into smaller pieces. And then there's a dual memory system. So there's both short-term memory and longer-term memory going on. And because memory can get stale after a while, for instance, a project you might have done 3 months ago is important to you, but it's not important today. It uses these sleep agents to keep refreshing what it considers the current memory. And so it has the ability to retrieve data either from the semantic meaning in the database or from different keywords that it extracts along the way. And the good thing you can do with it is also create your own agents that kind of work like an employee workforce to do your bidding based on the data stored in the memories. So I'm going to start by clicking on Access Console, and I've been brought to this area called David's Personal Workspace. It's all about the neural memory graph, and the areas of interest to us is going to be the API integration and guides. But before we can get going, I believe what I've got to do is go and click on this memory graph and try and get some data into the system. What I'm going to do is go into one of my folders here called the DZine system, and I'm just going to grab a couple of documents, and I think I can just drop them. So they're being persisted into the memory at the moment. And the next thing that should be happening is that they should be getting chunked. And at the moment, we've got 3 memories going on. We've got the brand guide, visual design system, and we've got a README file. And look at that, we can click on them and see the contents of each document. There's a little legend over here. I'm just going to start typing in primary color. We can see that this memory is also being chunked into various areas. Come back to the dashboard and we're going to go and check out the API integration documents. So I think what we're going to need to do is absorb some of this documentation into Claude Code. It's read all that documentation I gave it, and I think the main area we've got to start with is just getting ourselves a key. So we'll go over to the application. I think it said to press Command A, and it did. And that brings us to my user profile. And if we scroll down, there's an area where we can generate a new API key. So we'll just press that. We'll go with the Happy Dave, 12 days of Claudemas. We'll create a key. I'll delete this at the end of this system, but for now, we're just going to copy it. And let's go back to our terminal and see what we should do next. So we got the ability to store memories. Not what I want to do. I want to search memories. We'll just go into our product owner, and that should be able to read in the information from our backlog documents. Now, because this is a pretty fly by the seat of your pants sort of video that I'm doing, if there's any questions that you've got, I'm doing this for 12 days, and then I'm going to do on the 13th day an overview or a recap. So if there are any questions, that'll be the time when I can answer some of them. So let's just come back and see what it's doing here. So I'll say, I've gone and put a API key for Kybernesis down into the clipboard. I'm not sure where we're doing environments. I'm assuming we need to set up an environment key called Kybernesis API or something like that. And then I can put the value in. The other thing is that we were working on a ticket called FR05. Let's just see that come through, and we'll continue and say, this was a really successful pattern for us using a MCP server to talk to the local file system from the agent time we initially called it Kybernesis. Then what we did was we renamed it to local documents, I believe. And what I'd like to do with this one is follow that pattern, use the Kybernesis official documentation for APIs, but implemented as an MCP service like the last one. While it's going through and figuring things out, let's just come back to what we had done before. So I'm just going to copy that particular question and we'll refresh. If we press enter, this should still be working. And one of the things we'll notice is that there should be a yellow message saying MCP local docs. And in this case, it's using the local docs index. I'm assuming that if we've got a Kybernesis version going on, that there will be a different message at this particular location and potentially here as well. Now, as it's coming through, it's starting to read information from the functional requirement 05. That's where we did all our work. And now it's building out FR06, Kybernesis MCP. One of the things we can see is it's using the environment example. So it has a pattern for environments. While it's working that out, let's just jump on down here where we've got what is essentially an example file ready to go. Hopefully, if we copy and paste that, and we'll just call that M and press enter. And the main thing we want to check with these sorts of environment variables is that you wouldn't check them into your repository. We need to click on our git ignore and just ensure that the env file, that means it's light gray, which means it won't get committed to the repository. Because if it was committed to the repository, then someone could find it, find your key, and then start spending your money. Now, it looks like it's done some work. And the big thing here that we want is that we have these two values. So the thrills of working with alpha products, I just had a chat online with Ian, who built Kybernesis. He said just to work with this. So we've had a bit of an update. Now I can see Ian actually typing a message to me at the moment. He's suggesting that there's another way to do it, but I want to check whether this works anyway. His idea is that we should be using skills rather than the MCP server. It just works a little bit more effectively. And I'll just let you know that it looks like I've got success. And what I've done is I've just let Claude work through a few issues. Now, this is not normal what we're doing at the moment, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, mainly because this particular application in alpha, and we're using an endpoint that's going to be deprecated, but we got it working. So I'm just going to head over to our own application and let's just test whether we can talk to our local documents. Can you tell me what's going on with our local documents and maybe the backlog? So we'll just put that in and press enter. We'll bring up the camera. And so at the moment, it's looking for the MCP local docs. It noticed that there was also the Kybernesis. Not sure what's going to happen in this particular case. And there's our backlog. And what I want to do is just put in this question. What do you know about my branding system using Kybernesis? Now, this is a happy path test. I'm not trying to test that it's robust because, like I said, this is an alpha version of the system, but we should see my branding colors, which are browns and yellows and stuff like that. In fact, the big thing we'll look for is the word BMAD. There it is, new, because that's the font I use, and brand brown, brand gold. So how cool is that? Because this information has come from a second brain that's intelligent by nature. And if we go and click on something, so the visual design system, we can see where it got part of that information. So there's the brand brown coming through and there's the BMAD new. And personally, I think that's pretty awesome that we've been able to vibe code this. We've been able to hook up multiple memories to our brain today. Now it's flimsy as, like I wouldn't trust it in production at all, but for a proof of concept little tool, I'm really happy where this is. So I think at that point, we'll just end the video. If you want to check out my community where I'm going to be talking about context engineering, you can see it down in the link below. And I guess what we're going to be talking about tomorrow is image generation. So with that, hopefully we're going to use either FAL AI or Kai AI, because these are endpoints that will allow us to talk to multiple image generation system, and we'll figure out how to use them tomorrow. I'm Happy Dave. See you in the next video.